Hey, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting the students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I work at IE Business School Publishing, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. Do you have something you'd like some help with? Ask our guests. Go to professorgame.com/question and get your question answered in a future episode. Engagers, welcome to today's podcast. Today we have Karen. So Karen, are you prepared to engage?
Yeah, definitely.
Let's go. Let's do this. So Karen Sikkema. I'm not sure if I got that right.
You did, yes.
Good enough. So she's an experienced gamification, and experience designer. With her creative companies, Living Story and Wintertuin Experience BV, she is designing experiences, location-based games, adventures for cultural heritage, and game-based learning for teams and businesses. Her aim is to create meaning in the world by connecting people to themselves, to others, and to great locations, and thus contribute to creating a sense of belonging, connection, and respect for yourself and others. She is also a professor at HKU Utrecht University of the Arts in Netherlands and Politecnico di Milano in Italy. So she's teaching on game design, gamification, and entrepreneurship in the creative industries. Is there anything that we have left out of that intro, Karen, that you would like to comment on?
I don't think so. No. It always sounds quite impressive if someone else reads it to you like this. Yeah. So thank you.
You're very, very welcome. And thanks for taking your time to be today on Professor Game. And the first thing that we would like to know, Karen, is what does a typical day with Karen look like? If there's such a thing, or if not, a typical week or something around those things, just to get a feel of what your days or your life is like as a designer.
Yeah. Well, the days are very different, but I think, well, I could pick like the day of yesterday.
Sure.
I started yesterday with visiting a potential new client who would like to have a game designed for a team building experience, but also to learn. They have in their company many different small departments, and they all kind of work on their own goals, but they want to have have everyone kind of also work on the broader goal of the company, which people tend to leave out a little bit. So we try to brainstorm with them and think about what kind of game could you design around that, in combination with a trainer who will. So we will do a gamified start of the training, and then they will take over for a few training days, and then we will end again, kind of tying it all together. So that was the first part of my morning. Then I went back to my office, which is at the moment a huge botanical garden greenhouse from the beginning of the 20th century, in which we are building an escape room, which is not there yet. So we are brainstorming about that, and also still working on the permits, etc., to make sure that that actually can happen there. And we also had some discussions on a brainstorm for an escape room that we are doing for a client. And then we assembled all the stuff for a team game, which is a team building game that we are doing in the forest, that we will play next week with 120 people and 8 of my colleagues in the forest around Utrecht. So, well, this is kind of, it's not always the same type of day, of course, but this is the type of things that we do in our company.
So lots of brainstorming and lots of fun, it seems.
Yeah, definitely. And also trying to kind of apply that fun to learning in different contexts. So, yeah.
So very exciting. A lot of escape rooms as well. And in that sense, and all of those things that you've had, and all the things that you've mentioned that you're doing, I'm sure you're doing a fantastic job. But it's certainly not always rainbows and unicorns and everything's going beautiful.
No.
We also like to get into the story of sort of the dark side, to speak in the terms of Star Wars, of the of a time that maybe didn't go so well at the first try, and which you had some sort of fail or a first attempt in learning. And of course, how that set you up for your current success or future success, or what you learned from that experience that you're now applying to your daily practice.
Yeah, I think the best one, or the worst actually.
The most exciting one.
Yes, well, in hindsight, yes. At the moment, not always, but is when we were planning and designing a big location-based game for kind of touristic and cultural heritage purposes. So the game is called Lost in Time, and it's played with an iPad, with which you go around in the city. And actually, the story is that there is a professor who has designed a time machine, and your iPad is of course actually the time machine, so you can travel into time. And that way experience the stories from history while playing mini games, etc., etc. So, but we did that with using a lot of video, which is quite expensive. And actually, the game itself has become really, really nice. But what we tried to find out during making the game is how would you sell a game like this? And actually, the business model of selling that game was not thought through. Well, I wouldn't say at all, but it could have had much more work, which led to investing a lot of time and money in designing a beautiful game that has not been played by a lot of people at all, and from which we actually lost a lot of our investment. So this is after this all happened, it took us a few years to realize that it would really not take off. We really started thinking about what is actually the business model behind a game like this. What should you do? What should you not do? Should you design it as your own project or do it for a client, etc., etc. So in the years after, we learned a lot about location-based games and how you should use them and how you should design them. And actually, with our new location now, we have designed a new location-based game as well. But it's much, much, much cheaper in the design. And we thought through the business model, etc., and the marketing before much better. So this is one of the things that we learned a lot from.
So you had to think the whole thing through. And I think that's one of the things that maybe we forget sometimes. We get very excited about an idea, we pursue it, and I definitely invite you to get excited and pursue your ideas. However, sometimes it's also good to stop, especially if it's for a business, if you're trying to make money out of something, to think through what are the consequences of the things that you're putting in there. And maybe if it's only your own time, you just invest your own time or some of the people in the company. But as Karen was mentioning, video can be very, very expensive. So think through what are you going to put in, what you can put in.
Yeah.
How to experiment as well, because maybe you can take short action, and see what happens. What is the response? And I'm sure Karen has learned all of these things and much more.
We learned a lot about kind of the design thinking method and about much better becoming much better in kind of iterative design. So designing in short cycles and testing what you did and making sure that people actually really like what you do, and listening even much, much better to the people that you are designing for, because we actually in that case pursued really our own passion and our own idea, which I think you really should always do, but it has to be combined somehow, especially when you want to make a business out of it, with really listening to your clients and customers and see what they like and what they don't like, and in what way it can become a success. So the combination with our own passion and kind of what's in the market out there, there's somewhere a touching point that you really need to find.
Think of your players. We always say this, but think of your players. That
Yeah,
could be your students,
definitely.
it could be your clients, it could be whatever the people that are doing this. It's not the same to design a game for a second grade student than for a university student. It's not the same. There are different types of players. They have different motivations. They have different levels of knowledge. So
Yeah.
just think about them. Don't consider what they want, what they're motivated by, and that's going to lead certainly your gamification design. And taking a 180-degree spin on this question, Karen, what would you say is some big challenge that you actually faced and faced and solved using maybe gamification, game design, one of your approaches? And we would love if that experience as well comes from your education side. If not, we can also go for the client. But education is always our primary interest.
I think there is a case from my personal experience as well, which was in a period that was really hectic, and really I tried to do a dozen things at the same time. And this I in the end kind of helped solving by designing my own kind of planning game, which was really nice because it made a lot of fun for me in this hectic, chaotic days. This is on the one side an example that I thought of, and on the other hand, I'm a designer, but also owner of my own company, so an entrepreneur, and that's why I teach also about entrepreneurship in the creative industries. And one of the things that was kind of challenging for me is indeed how to kind of design your lessons around that within a university context, because one of the things that is most important to me is as an entrepreneur is that you learn by doing and you learn by experiencing. And this is actually one of the things that you do in games and gamification as well. So I started thinking about that when I was teaching about entrepreneurship. And in the end, it led to a game about entrepreneurship, which I designed together with an innovation consultant and also use now in my entrepreneurship courses. And actually, I went with that game last week to the Business Learning Games conference in Lisbon as a finalist. So from the thinking about teaching about entrepreneurship, we designed a really nice game, I think.
Nice. That sounds very exciting. What can you give us a few clues of what the game looks like?
Yeah, definitely. It is a type of board game which looks a little bit. It has kind of tiles like the Carcassonne game, the board game. And what we actually tried to do was a lot of games about entrepreneurship are actually in the kind of narrative like you have a business and you have to set up this business. And I really wanted to kind of take it out from this more obvious way of thinking. So the game is called Adventure, and what you actually do with your team is go on an exploration of a new continent which has been discovered, and you go on this travel with your team. You first have to select a mission together, and you have to select your own character based on entrepreneurship skills, which are from a research by a Dutch researcher. And then during your kind of travels in this game, you discover that when your team is really diverse, for example, you get more success than when you have a team that is all the same people, which really is one of the things that we wanted to put in the game because, well, especially young startup teams, they tend to, when they hire other people, they tend to hire people that look like them because they like them the most and they brainstorm with them really, really well. And they don't realize that they should hire someone who's completely different from them because then you have more skills in your team and you can do more stuff, basically. So this we try to translate in a team of discoverers and explorers in this game.
Very, very interesting, Karen. That's super, super interesting as an initiative. And I also love the fact that it's not digital. So you open the possibilities to a board game. And that's actually fantastic. And in that sense, Karen, you were explaining us how this game in particular works. But when you approach a problem, a class, whatever it is that you want to talk about in this question, but when you face any of these problems that you want to solve or any of these situations that you want to gamify or create a game design, do you have any sort of process that you follow or any certain steps or key things that you take into account when you design these experiences?
Yeah, actually, based on our process, I'm in the process myself of kind of designing the model for what we actually do. We always start with, especially when it's in a learning context, with really trying to figure out either if it's my own class or a client or another teacher. What is actually the learning goals? So what do you really want to learn from this game, and what do you want people to actually do or experience or discover? And when that is clear, then for us, the next step is almost always finding some kind of narrative or a kind of epic story theme to design the game in. So in this adventure example, it's the narrative of a discovery expedition. You can have the narrative of, Robin Hood who is saving a forest, or it can be actually anything. But this is really helping me design the game in a way that everything fits together and you really get into the experience of the game quite quickly. And from the narrative, the kind of game goals will more or less automatically follow. And then we really think about things like, how do we motivate players? What kind of actions are they going to perform? What are the different player types that are most common in this group? And how are they motivated? How are we making sure that there is a social dimension? Because I'm really convinced that games and gamification it's of course about people and about people connecting to themselves and connecting to each other and learning from each other. So this is one of the most important parts for designing our games. And of course, thinking about how will we make sure that it's fun, etc. And then when we are done, we really have a look at how does the game transfer back into the learning goals. So making sure that it's not only a fun game to do for one afternoon or a few days or whatever, but also that there is some learning aspect which connects back to real life and what you actually want to learn for your class or your colleagues or your company.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much for your process, Karen.
Thank you.
Engagers, quick break from this interview. If you love what gamification can achieve, then you will love going to a gamification conference. And this year, we got a 10% discount for the Engagers to assist to Gamification Europe 2018 in Amsterdam. All you have to do is get your tickets for the conference at professorgame.com/gamificationeurope. That's our affiliate link. It was an incredible experience in 2017, full of chances to learn and interact with the top experts. If you think you want to make it, get your tickets sooner rather than later. Their prices are only going up and tickets might run out. So click pause and go to professorgame.com/gamificationeurope to get your tickets discounted today and also support Professor Game. So now, Karen, we are going to go into this sort of the second part of this interview in which we change a bit, we shift slightly the way that we're asking the questions, the way that we format what we're looking for. And instead of going for stories, we're going actually for maybe a bit more straightforward answers in this section. And the first thing...
You want me to talk less?
No, it's not about...
No, I understand.
It's not just about talking less. It's more, and you love narrative and storytelling, and that's fantastic, and that's a technique that we use very much, and especially for the first section. But here maybe it's less about the story and more about what you think about these different items. So the first one is, if there's anything that you feel that is sort of maybe a best practice or something that any gamification project or game-based learning project could benefit from.
I think, as you said before already, that for me it's at the start thinking less about making it digital and more about what is actually the goals that you have and the behavior that you want to see in people when they play the game. And more often than not, this can actually be achieved by doing something non-digital, which also often has people connect more to each other because they are actually playing a physical game together.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's true. And keeping that as a perspective as well, that not everything is digital, and as well, many professors, many teachers out there might be sometimes afraid when they hear gamification and they think, oh, this whole digital adventure and all this programming, zeros and ones, so complex, so complicated, and it can be a fear that gets you stuck. So I love that comment. I think it's a very, very useful way of seeing it as well.
Thank you. And it's actually much cheaper as well, more often than not.
Especially if you're trying to do your homemade things and it's not like you have a studio or you have, your own company or something similar. If it's more of a homely thing, that is what the situation of most educators in general, it's certainly easier to achieve in that sense.
Yeah.
So Karen, what would you say is your favorite game? Maybe it could be current or from all history of games. What would you say is your favorite?
I have to say it is actually a digital game, but it's Myst, which is a bit old already. But it's one of the first games that I played on a PC.
The other day we were talking with you probably know him, Michiel van Junen.
Oh yeah, he said the same. I'm sure.
Yes, he did.
Part of the experience was us playing together.
Oh, there you go. I had the CD-ROM in my hands. That's a quick clue into how old it could be. I had the CD-ROM in my hands, and for whatever reason, I couldn't play it on my PC, and lost the chance of playing Myst in its time. So I promised Michiel I would try to play it as soon as I could, but life has been a bit crazy in these last months. So
I think you
hopefully
can
I'll get a chance.
Play it even on the iPad nowadays.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Not too many excuses except for lack of time.
No. Oh, but I understand that one really well. So
it's an acute problem that we tend to suffer as humans.
Definitely.
So Karen, in that same sense, is there anybody, we just talked about Michiel, but who was relatively recently on the podcast, is there anybody that you would like to listen to in an interview like this one in Professor Game?
I'm a big fan of Jane McGonigal.
Yes, Jane McGonigal, Reality is Broken.
Yes, definitely.
She is definitely a must listen to, a must read, and
Definitely.
We certainly hope to have her in the show soon enough.
Yeah. Well, I will definitely listen then.
We hope you do.
I listen to the other podcasts as well, of course, but this one I would never miss.
Top of the list.
Yeah.
In that same sense, Karen, is there a book that you would recommend to the audience, to the engagers?
Well, yeah. It's also her book, Reality is Broken, that I always recommend. And I also really like the books Drive, which is about...
Daniel Pink, right?
Yeah, about types of motivation. And the book Flow as well, from Csikszentmihalyi Mihai.
Yes, indeed. Would you? Because I was thinking of the books that you're recommending, and I guess that maybe a more of a gateway book, like a first book to read, would perhaps be the Jane McGonigal's book, and then go into the others, right?
Yeah. But I think when you are into game-based learning, then the other two are, they're less about games and gamification, perhaps, but more about how to motivate people, and it's also really applicable to learning, I think.
It's fundamental. We have to think of our students, of our learners, whomever they might be. We have to think of them, and these books are fantastic ways to uncover what could be behind their motivations.
Yeah,
which
definitely.
Is core of games and gamification and all these techniques we talk about.
I think it's one of the things that in learning could be applied much more.
And needs to be as well.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Karen, what would you say is your superpower when creating these experiences, or any of these experiences that you've been talking about? Your sweet spot?
I think for me it's it's bringing together the people who are playing a game and the game itself and the location where you are. Because I really believe that the location is a very nice addition to playing a game.
Yes.
So that's why we also design for cultural heritage sites, etc. And then in that sense, when we bring these three parts together, I think the games that we design really make people connect and also give them some kind of sense of belonging somehow.
And that's why location-based games are starting to be a thing. It's not only Pokemon Go, but there's many things going on in that space. Yeah. And that especially in what was mentioned right now by Karen, that there's many possibilities to explore in this space.
Yeah, definitely.
Karen, now we're going to go into a slightly, maybe we could say it's a gamified question in this podcast. And it's because we don't know what the question is going to come up. I did take a look at your profile to make sure that we don't ask you something that is completely out of, right field and you don't know it's coming. But you will listen to this for the first time. So This is the question of actually I think it fits in pretty well to what we've been talking about and to your profile in particular. So this person says, I'm a business school professor and I haven't used gamification before, but I have been thinking of trying an escape room with my students to see how it goes. Interesting.
Wonderful.
I'd like to test their reactions. I'm doubting because they might feel gamification is something more for kids and I teach in graduate school. Okay, so here are the doubts. How can I know if this is for me? What would be my first steps?
I think it's a really good idea. I think one of the first things it's important to realize is that I think the people who are playing escape rooms are generally in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. So in that sense, this is definitely not something for kids per se. And in terms of what to do is, I think just try. I think with gamification and games, you never learn when you are not trying. So you can talk about it a lot. You can ask people, would you like to play a game? But they actually don't know until they do, because then they experience, and it's really about learning by doing, both for the students and in this case, I think, the professor. So what I would do is try to see, or play some escape rooms yourself and try to see what you really like and what is the type of things that you think can be applied to what you want to learn your students. And then set up something small and experiment and see what they think. I think students are really into kind of also helping you to set something like this to make it work.
Yeah, the motivation of the students and their ownership over something which they have been involved is certainly going to be a lot higher.
And actually what I've been doing before is having the class design an escape room for their learning. So instead of designing it yourself, have the students design it for each other, which is, there's great results in that, because they are they get really motivated if they design something that someone else will play, and then they give feedback to each other, and then it's actually much easier for yourself because you don't have to do a lot.
Well, but the facilitation of these kinds of things is not as easy as it maybe looks like from the other side.
That's definitely true. But in terms of designing, I understand that thinking about I have to design an escape room can feel like a bit of a daunting task, while facilitating a group of students to do something is something that's much more close to you as a professor, I think. And then you can learn yourself. So seeing what others, what the students design can help you design it better for the next year or something.
Those are great recommendations, Karen. I just to maybe sum it up, I would say the first thing that you said is of course, go to a few escape rooms and experience it yourself, see what you like, what you don't like.
And have fun with them.
Definitely have a lot of fun. Analyze them, but have fun in them, because otherwise you don't know what will be fun, at least for you. Then the other recommendation I brought from what you were saying is certainly to consider maybe the possibility of not designing it yourself, but get the students involved, get them to test out things and to check out how it goes, and maybe you can get some new ideas to do it in the next period, in the next semester, in the next year, the next class, maybe even if it's with the same students. So that could be an interesting experience, especially for creative subjects that you might be teaching, like Karen. And finally, well, of course, you have to test it. You have to go out and do that thing and let them know that you're experimenting is something that I would add. And they will take, in general, the experience that we've gathered, especially from other guests as well, is that when you are open about these kinds of things and saying that you're testing this out to help them in their learning, to help them have more fun, they tend to be more lenient if things don't go exactly as you were planning and they're not perfect. They can be a lot more forgiving if you're transparent with your intentions.
Yeah, definitely. And in my experience, then when you ask afterwards for feedback and see what and also on not only about on the design of the game, but also about the learning content, then surprisingly in that feedback session they tend to learn a lot still, because then they are really thinking about, okay, this were the learning goals, this is what we were supposed to learn, did we actually learn this? Yeah, we did, because this and this and that. So it's actually also a kind of a step for students to kind of work on the learning content again. So in my experience, this is often the kind of session in which a lot of learning still takes place.
Yeah. Thanks for all those examples, all those things that we could be using if we're going to be designing an escape room in the future, or if we're considering even to do such a thing.
Yeah.
So finally, Karen, is there any final piece of advice you would like to, maybe more general than the escape room, but any final piece of advice you would like to leave the engagers with?
Well, I think that what's important is to kind of try and think in a playful way instead of wanting to design from scratch something intricate and complex, but just try out different ways of getting things more playful to begin with. And I really like the what's in the book by Jesse Schell, who says, well, game design is really can be very complex and also very interesting area to, but you have to start somewhere. Any one of us started by at one point saying, I'm a game designer, even though it's not even something that you really feel inside. But being a game designer really means that you have to test and experiment and just go out and do stuff. And which set me also really on that path, thinking, okay, well, I actually am a game designer. And by you only learn by doing this yourself and gaining experience. So you have to just start somewhere and then learning by doing yourself, really.
Yeah, as I've mentioned him a few times before in this podcast, John Lee Dumas, I don't know if you've heard his podcast. He says, if you want to be a podcaster, do a podcast. If you want to be a game designer, do game design.
Exactly.
So if you want to do. That's
and
a great
start.
Advice.
And I think it helps if you find people around you that you can brainstorm with and test some stuff. If you sit by yourself at your table trying to design a game, then sometimes it can be a bit hard. But in my experience, when you find someone that you can talk to for even only 10 minutes, then the creative process goes much faster and it's also much more fun.
Definitely. The social experience as in gamification.
Yeah.
So Karen, we arrived to what we could call the plug zone. Can you let us know how can we connect with you? What's your webpage? I don't know, any place where we can connect with you, know more about the work that you're doing. Just let us know.
Sure. Well, anyone who is ever in the Netherlands is more than welcome to visit us in a small town called Baren, in this beautiful cultural heritage site, the Wintertuin. But if you are not in the neighborhood, you can always find us at the website livingstory.nl and email me at karen@livingstory.nl.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for leaving all those details and for letting us know that we can also visit you in that beautiful town. I would love to do that if I have any opportunity in the future. However, Karen, today and Engagers, we've had a wonderful time. We've had a lot of experiences from Karen, a lot of advice, very, very useful to take out there and to use it, tomorrow. But now it's regretfully, and for now, time to say it's a game over.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks to you, Karen.
Thank you.
Hey, Engagers, thank you for listening to Professor Game Podcast. How are you listening to this podcast? If it's through a podcasting app, have you subscribed and rated this podcast? Please do so. That way we can reach more Engagers like you to achieve our mission of making learning amazing. If you want more instructions, go to professorgame.com/iTunes. And before you go on to your next mission, would you like to know how Chris Aviles changes the rules of the game in gamification? Then subscribe using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there. Hey, we have an Easter egg over here. So I just wanted to give you a quick reminder that Karen is going to be in Gamification Europe. So she'll be very soon in Amsterdam, where I'll be at as well. So if you want to be there, remember that you can use the link professorgame.com/gamificationeurope, and we will meet over there in Amsterdam. See you there.